There's a moment that arrives, sometimes, not often, but sometimes, when everything you're doing stops, when you're not moving towards something anymore or away from something, you're just standing still. And in that stillness, you think about the choices you made, not to judge them, not to celebrate them, just to look at them, to see them as they are. And in that moment, something happens, something quiet, something you might not even notice unless you're paying attention. You feel a strange kind of pressure, not a heavy one, just there. It's the pressure to understand why you chose what you chose, to find meaning in it, to be able to tell a story about it that makes sense. Because if the choice doesn't make sense, if it doesn't mean something, then what was it? Just randomness, just chance, just a moment when you picked one thing over another for no reason that matters. And we can't live with that. We're not built to live with that. So we tell ourselves stories. Here's something that's true about being human that nobody really talks about. Every time you choose something, you're not just choosing toward it, you're choosing away from everything else. When you choose a person, you're choosing away from all the other people you might have loved. When you choose a path, you're choosing away from every other path you could have taken. When you choose a life, you're choosing away from infinite other lives you could have lived. We talk about freedom as if it means you get everything, but really, freedom means you get to pick one thing and lose access to all the rest. That's the architecture of choice. That's what it actually is. So after you choose, there's something that happens, not immediately, but eventually. You start to think about the things you gave up. You think about the road you didn't take, the job you almost took, the city you didn't move to, the message you typed and deleted, all the smaller versions of yourself that could have existed but didn't. And that's a kind of grief, a quiet kind, a kind we're not supposed to talk about, because we're supposed to be satisfied with our choices. We're supposed to be moving forward. We're supposed to believe that what we chose was right. But underneath that, there's always a doubt, a ghost of an alternate life following you around. And we can't tell anyone about that ghost, so it just follows, quietly. There's a psychological weight that comes after choosing. It's not obvious at first. You make a choice and you move forward. You're busy, you're living. You don't have time to think about whether the choice was good or bad. But somewhere underneath the noise, there's a small voice asking, was this right? And the voice doesn't stop asking. It just gets quieter. We try to answer it, consciously or not. We try to build a case for why we chose well. We look for evidence. We remember the moments that validated the choice. We rewrite the moments that made us doubt it. We tell the story over and over until it sounds true. Not because we're lying, but because the alternative, to live with the idea that our choices were meaningless, that they just happened, that you could have chosen the other thing and ended up in the same place, is unbearable. Meaninglessness is harder to live with than doubt. Meaninglessness is harder than sadness. Meaninglessness is the thing that breaks us. So we don't allow it. We reach into the choice we made and we pull meaning out of it, even if we had to invent it. We say, this choice made me who I am. This choice was necessary. This choice, even if it was difficult, led me somewhere that mattered. And the remarkable thing is, once we tell ourselves this story enough times, it becomes partially true. Because identity is built by the stories we tell ourselves about what we've done. We become the person who made that choice. We become the person who chose this path, and that becomes real. So we don't just create meaning after the fact, we create ourselves after the fact. If you were really honest with yourself, you might ask, am I afraid that I made the wrong choice? And yes, maybe sometimes, but that's not really the root of it. The real fear is different. It's deeper. The real fear is that the choice didn't matter, that you could have chosen the other thing and ended up in the same place, that you could have chosen wrong and it wouldn't have made a difference. Because if choices don't matter, then you don't matter. Your decisions don't shape your life. You're just being moved along by forces you can't control. That's what frightens us. Not wrongness, but meaninglessness. So we cling to the idea that our choices meant something. We cling to it even when we're not sure. We do this because we need to believe that we're the author of our own lives, not the character, the author. We need to believe that the decisions we made actually wrote the story. And here's what's interesting. Maybe they didn't. Maybe the choice wouldn't have changed anything. Maybe you would have ended up in the same place, with the same person, living the same life. But believing that the choice mattered changed you. Believing that you chose well made you into the person who chose well, and that belief shaped how you moved through the world after you chose. So, in a strange way, the meaning we assign to the choice, even if we had to invent it, becomes real through how we live afterward. We create reality by narrating it. There's something we don't talk about enough. It's that most of the time, we don't actually know if our choices were good. We might find out years later that choosing one thing opened a door we never expected, or that choosing another thing closed a door we didn't know was important. We move through time with partial information. We're always choosing blindly a little bit, and yet we have to choose anyway. So there's this strange dance we do. We choose without knowing, and then we tell ourselves we knew what we were doing. We rewrite the uncertainty as certainty. We rewrite the blindness as vision. And I think part of what keeps us going is the gentleness we offer ourselves about this. We don't need proof that the choice was right. We can't have that proof. The future hasn't happened yet. What we need is permission to stop asking. We need to believe that the choice was enough. Not perfect, not obviously right, but enough. Enough that we can stop second-guessing it. Enough that we can tell ourselves a story about it. Enough that we can move forward without constantly looking back at the road we didn't take. This is not acceptance. It's something gentler. It's the willingness to live with uncertainty while also choosing to believe that what we did mattered. Both things at the same time. When you're older, not necessarily when you're old, but enough time has passed, you'll tell people about the choices you made. Maybe someone will ask you why you chose what you chose, or maybe you'll just find yourself telling the story without being asked. And you'll describe the moment of choosing. You'll talk about what you thought, what you felt, what made sense at the time. And here's what happens. The story you tell will be true, but it will also be different from the moment itself. The moment itself was confused. It was uncertain. It was you looking at options you couldn't fully see, trying to make a decision with incomplete information, feeling a little bit lost. But the story you tell will have coherence. It will have direction. It will have a thread running through it that makes sense. And people will listen to your story and they'll nod, and they'll understand, and you'll feel understood. Not because you lied, but because you narrated it. And maybe that's all we're doing, all of us. We're just narrating our lives into meaning. We're taking the confusion and the blindness and the arbitrary moments of choosing, and we're turning them into stories that feel real because we tell them enough times. We're becoming the people in our own stories. And maybe that's okay. Maybe that's not a failure or a delusion. Maybe that's just what it means to be human. To turn your life into a narrative that makes sense. To believe in the story you tell. To live as if the choice mattered, even when you're not sure. Because the living as if matters. The living as if is what makes it real. There's no resolution to this. I want to be honest about that. There's no moment where you suddenly know for certain that your choice was right. There's no peace that comes from finally understanding that you chose correctly. That's not how it works. What happens instead is something quieter, something smaller. You stop asking the question, not because you have an answer, but because you've gotten tired of asking, or because enough time has passed that looking back feels less urgent, or because you've told yourself the story enough times that it feels like the truth. And in that quiet, there's a kind of acceptance, not the acceptance that comes from resolution, but the acceptance that comes from exhaustion, from the gradual understanding that you're going to live this life, the one you chose, regardless of whether it was the right one. You're going to live it, so you might as well believe it meant something. And maybe that's where the meaning comes from, not from the moment of choosing, but from the moment after, when you decide to commit to the choice, when you decide that it was enough. Because nothing is guaranteed to mean something. Meaning isn't something that exists in the choice itself, waiting to be discovered. Meaning is something we assign, something we create through the way we live afterward. We make the choice mean something by living as if it did. And we do this not because we're dishonest, but because we're human, because we can't live with meaninglessness, because we need to believe that we're the author of our own lives, even when we know that's not entirely true. We need the story. We need to tell ourselves that we chose, that we decided, that we had some hand in shaping what came next, even when the truth is more complicated, even when the truth is that we were partly choosing and partly being chosen for, and partly just standing at a fork in the road, unable to see where it leads, hoping that we chose right. So when you find yourself looking back at a choice you made, and you feel that quiet pressure to assign meaning to it, just know that you're not alone in that. Everyone does this. Everyone tells themselves stories about their choices. Everyone reaches backward and tries to pull meaning out of moments that were, in the living of them, uncertain and blind. And maybe that's not a weakness. Maybe that's how we survive, how we move forward, how we become ourselves. You don't need to know that your choice was right. You don't need proof that you chose well. You just need to believe that it was enough, that the life you chose is enough, that the person you became through choosing is enough. And that belief, the one you create, the one you narrate into existence, that becomes real. Not because it was always true, but because you decided to live as if it were.